Good day, participants. Today we would be discussing about chapter number 3 of CFP2. Subject is risk management and insurance planning, and the chapter is risk management process. As we have known from our previous chapters about risk, various ways, preliminary ways to manage the risk, today we would study it in more detail. As we know that what is risk? Risk is a situation where there is a possibility of an adverse reaction or an adverse situation. So risk is a situation where there can be an adverse situation, where there may not be an adverse situation. So risk is a situation of uncertainty. As this chapter is all about risk management, so we would be considering how these kind of risks can be managed. As we can appreciate that risk would be different in different circumstances, and with different entities it would be a different risk. For an individual, the risk would be of different nature. For an organization, the risk would be of different nature. In organizations also, the risk would again differ from one type of organization to another type of organization. For example, if it's a mining industry, it is prone to different kind of risk. If it is an educational institution, it is prone to another set of risks. When we talk about risk management, as you will study in management subject, that what basically is management. Management is basically, it's a process of consisting of 4 important processes. Number 1 is planning, number 2 is organizing, number 3 is directing, and number 4 is controlling. Similarly, risk management is also consists of the same processes: how to plan about reducing or eliminating the risks, how to organize then according to the plan, how to direct, and then how to control the various parameters which have been planned initially. So we would be talking in those lines. Well, first and the foremost job of any organization in order to manage the risk is to minimize the adverse effects of the potential losses of the various reasons at the least possible cost. So therefore, it has to identify various risk exposures faced by its organization. Then it has to select the most appropriate technique in order to reduce those risks, and sometimes to eliminate those risks. Sometimes it may not be possible to eliminate the risk because risks are not in the control of the organization or the person. Otherwise, they won't be called as risks. So sometimes if the risks happens, then how to reduce the after effects of those risks. Now, risk management is done because of various objectives. Various objectives could be, one of the objectives could be mere survival, but survival is also very necessary. First of all, any person or organization thinks about the basic survival. If there is a sudden loss or sudden fortuitous loss, and the organization buildings comes to a doldrums, so in that case the person's whole life's earnings are at stake. So in those circumstances, the organization has to think of ways for its survival. Those cases, if it feels that there are certain risks which it will not be possible to retain them, so it's better to transfer those risks in the form of insurance. So it would be better that risks are insured. Second objective is peace of mind, whether it's from the point of view of an individual or whether it's from the point of view of an organization. If it is from the point of view of an individual, yes, it gives a sense of security in the person that yes, this person is insured, so his family doesn't have to face the various hardships in case of the death of the bread earner. Similarly, in the case of organization also, the organization can concentrate on other activities of the organization. Third objective of risk management is maximization of profits. We know that it's tough competition in every field today. So in industries also, it's age of globalization, and with the liberalization having already set in India, organizations really have to have a global look, and they have to think in international terms. So therefore, in order to survive in this cutthroat competition, they have to try new and innovative ways in order to reduce their costs and increase their profits. So risk management should not take a back seat. because on one hand they are trying for new innovative methods, they are trying to bring new technologies, but on the other hand they are unaware of the risks surrounding the organization. So those risks have to be taken care of. Risks are not necessarily due to any fire or earthquake. Risk could assume various proportions. The risk could be losing of a key employee, more turnover in the employee turnover in the company, less employee satisfaction. So all these are also considered as risks in today's corporate organization. So any organization has to identify the key areas where the risk can happen. Sometimes there can be a mis-selling by the company's salespeople. They could be the employees of the company, they could be the intermediaries of the company. In order to be more dynamic, people tend to mis-sell. They tend to overstate the benefits of the products. So in the long run, what happens? It tarnishes the image of the company. When the features of the product doesn't match with the promises made to the customer, then it tarnishes the image of the company and it spoils the goodwill of the company. And in those cases of organizations who are regulated by some regulating body, for example, banks are regulated by RBI, insurance companies are regulated by IRDA, stock broking companies and mutual fund companies, asset management companies, they are regulated by SEBI. So in turn, they also have to incur the wrath of the regulating agencies. Their licenses may be cancelled, they may be asked an explanation, or their services can be terminated, etc., etc. So a lot of goodwill or a lot of business is at stake. So therefore, this is also a risk position. So they have to identify those positions, those areas where the risk can happen. Now, another objective could be stable earnings, because any organization doesn't want an interruption in its production, interruption in its service. The moment a risk takes place, there is interruption in the production. So on one hand, they will lose the profits that would have earned. Rather than losing the profits, the balance sheets show negative results because they have to incur fixed costs. They have to pay to their employees. And in the meantime, they also lose the goodwill in the market. And in the intervening period, the people tend to forget because it's a very dynamic world. So other products would occupy the mind of the people. So by the time, for example, for some period, their services have been suspended. So in that intervening period, the company is forgotten by the customers. So once again, if they come back in the market, they once again have to start from the scratch. So that is another area of risk. Then another objective is little or no business interruption. This I have already dealt with. They don't want any business interruption in between. Now, this business interruption due to any kind of risk, as we know it in insurance, it could be due to fire, due to other natural calamities. So if one business branch is shut down because of some risk due to natural causes or due to burglary, definitely there is a business interruption. Then another objective of risk management is sustainable growth. They want their growth to sustain. And for example, the growth in a one particular year is 6%. So in another year, the company would want a growth of 10%, and subsequently they want the growth also to increase exponentially. Then last but not the least, another objective of risk management is social responsibility. The organization also has a corporate responsibility. Corporate social responsibility is assuming importance in today's corporate circles. So it has corporate social responsibility towards the citizens, towards its customers, towards the society as a whole. So therefore, it has to see whether its factory is not polluting the surroundings, because after all, the people who are residing in the surrounding areas has got some responsibility towards them also. Let us see what are the various steps in risk management. Risk management consists of three major steps. Number one is risk analysis. Number two, risk control. And number three, risk financing. Talking about the first step, risk analysis. Risk analysis means analyzing the various risks with the company. It implies a backroom exercise of looking at the entire gamut of risks. It has to define which are the areas which are exposed to risk. It has to identify the nature of the risk, and then it has to quantify the impact by those risks. For example, the company may feel that there might be a risk due to mis-selling. So due to that mis-selling, what would be the impact in terms of sales? How the sales can be affected? The sales can be reduced. So there should be some kind of quantification. so that there should be a cost benefit analysis by the company's top management. Okay, we will spend this much in mitigating this risk or in this risk management, so how much we are spending and what benefits we will achieve in the future. So risk analysis involves risk identification and risk assessment. Risk identification means one has to identify the potential risks facing the organization and identify the source of problems. What is the source of the problem? What is the origin of the problem? And then it has to assess those risks, that is assessing in terms of the frequency of that risk and the severity of the risk. What is the frequency with which it happens and what can be the severity? What would be the quantum of the loss because of one happening? So it may also involve certain statistical concepts in order to quantify those risks. The second step is risk control. Now, how to control those risks? As we know that expected losses are a product of frequency as well as severity. So therefore, in order to control the risk, number one, we have to control the frequency of the risk. That is, if a particular risk, the frequency is, for example, it's a boiler in a factory. So the frequency of boiler explosion is 2 times in a month. So they have to see that yes, we have to reduce the frequency. Instead of 2 times, it should be 0. Nowadays we talk about zero defect products, 0 errors, total quality management, TQM. So therefore, such kind of frequencies should be reduced to the minimum or they should be totally eliminated. And then severity factors also. For example, in the case of fire, we know that fire, the frequency of fire could be once in say 5 years. But even if it happens once in 5 years, the severity would be such that it would engulf the whole factory and it would result in huge losses. Everything would be extinguished in that fire. So the severity is frightening. So therefore, in order to reduce such severity, proper fire control equipments can be installed, proper fire detection systems can be installed, proper fire alarm systems can be installed in the factory, then proper sprinkler systems and other foam systems, other kind of chemicals can be stored so that immediately the fires can be doused in case of any detection of fire. Then there are special fire suits available in case of any live or any important person trapped in the fire. One can save that person. People should be trained in firefighting. Similarly, we see that there are specialized safety departments in large industries. They have their own fire brigade firefighting equipments. In smaller towns, we have seen in Haridwar, where BHEL is located. Once there was a fire, the municipal authorities could not send their fire tenders in time, or rather they were inadequate to handle the volume of fire in one particular place. But then BHEL services were employed in those cases because they were having more modern equipments and more trained personnel to deal with such kind of emergencies. So this means that how to reduce the severity of such risk. So risk control also means to break down into the following things. So in a matter of gist, we can say the aim of the organization should be, number one, loss prevention. Loss prevention means to prevent the loss from happening, to reduce the frequency of the happening, and ultimately to ensure that such losses do not happen. And secondly, loss minimization. In case of such happening, one cannot say that okay, my factory, there cannot be any fire in my factory, there cannot be any kind of accident in my factory. My machinery are so modern, no person can put his hand in the machinery. I mean, no bearings can fall apart and it cannot injure anybody. But in case of injury, what are the measures you have taken to reduce those risks? So loss minimization is also very necessary to reduce the severity of the losses. Now, in order to control the risks, that is to reduce the frequency and severity, definitely an amount has to be allocated for controlling such risks. So therefore, risk financing also is an important part of risk management. The top management should provide provision in its finance to control such losses, because the risk may have to be transferred to the insurance company, so definitely there would be spending in terms of premiums. Then in the case of risk reduction by way of installing some sophisticated equipments, again there would have to be some investment. People would have to be trained, equipments would have to be ordered, then their maintenance of the equipments, etc. In case of risk transfer, as we know that risk transfer takes place when counterparty, in this case we understand risk transfer by way of insurance. So insurer agrees to assume the risk and it charges the price in the form of premium. Insurance is the most common form of risk transfer, as we know. Second is risk retention. Sometimes, many times the companies decide to retain the risk. So they have to decide which risk to retain. For example, there are certain organizations which retain the risk, which do not transfer the risk. For example, Indian Railways, because they have the huge number of employees with them. So they are not insuring the risks with an insurance company. They are their own insurers. So because they have a huge amount of corpus in terms of giving salaries to the people, to their employees, in terms of running a large network of railways. So they are their own insurers. Similarly, the defense services in India, whether it's Army, Navy or Air Force, they are their own insurers. They don't insure their employees. In turn, the services give them insurance from their own funds. Talking about insurance market dynamics. Insurance marketplace is characterized by relatively fixed demand and has many features of commodity market. People buy insurance because of need, and sometimes it is also required by law. For example, in our country, in the case of motor insurance, third party or the liability insurance is compulsory. So in that case, it is required by law. So therefore, the requirements keep on changing. So organization has to assess the risk control measures, the risk retention measures periodically. It's not that once a particular planning has been done. So one has to monitor these plans. Like in any kind of management, there is planning, there is organizing, then there is directing, and then you have to control the risk. You have to take a feedback. Yes, whatever we had planned, it is properly organized, and whether the risks are under control or not. So, and then one has to then revert back again to the planning stage. Maybe one has to incorporate the necessary changes in the planning. So therefore, it is a dynamic process. If we talk about underwriting cycle, underwriting, as we know, it's a department with insurance companies which assesses the risk, various risks, and accordingly, and after assessment of the risk, then it decides whether to grant the insurance or whether to refuse the insurance, and if it has to grant the insurance, on what terms and conditions should grant the insurance. So therefore, underwriting, it's also a cycle. So it's a pattern of gains and losses within the insurance industry that repeats over time, where rates and premiums alternately rise and fall rather than growing smoothly. So status of underwriting can be ascertained by a measure called combined ratio. So, and the combined ratio is the ratio of paid losses and loss adjustments expenses plus underwriting expenses to premiums. Well, underwriting cycle, there are various reasons of underwriting cycle. Because insurance company also has to vary its rates, premium rates, according to the market dynamic. Because of the changes in interest rates, it has to alter its premiums. Because of stock market fluctuations, like nowadays in Indian market, we see that the stock market is going upwards day by day. Recently, it has crossed 16,500. So, insurance, in order to make the insurance plans attractive, insurance companies also has to accordingly adjust to their prices. Then it has to price its products for catastrophic losses, and it has to price its products for the normal losses accordingly. Now this was in terms of insurance companies, from the point of view of insurance company. Now from coming back again to the organization which is involved in the process of its risk management. Now organizations also have to undertake a process called as loss forecasting. We know that insurance companies undertake this process of loss forecasting because they have their actuarial department, and this is the job of the actuaries to forecast the loss, to calculate the probability of the loss happening. So according to they calculate the premium. But on the other hand, if the organization is undertaking the risk management process, they also have to do to undertake an exercise called loss forecasting. And these days, corporate companies are undertaking such an exercises. So they loss forecasting, they have to again identify the risks which an organization faces. They have to analyze the frequency and the severity of the loss exposure. Various measures of loss forecasting could be mathematical as well as statistical. One of the method could be probability analysis. Another method is regression analysis. Another method could be forecasting based on loss distribution. Another method could be based on forecasting which is based on law of large numbers. So therefore, according to these various measures, we can say that risk management is an important area from the individual's point of view also, from the organization point of view also, and from the family's point of view also. In our day-to-day lives also, we have to manage our risks, we have to manage the investment risk. These days it is said that if one has not invested his or her money in the stock market or in mutual funds, one has only invested his money in money marketing instruments, for example PPF, NSE, then also one has not managed his risk properly because one has not seen the upward trend in the market. So one has not tried to utilize the upward swing in the market. So one is at a loss if one has not tried these markets. So therefore one has to analyze the various pros and cons, whether it's in the investment area, whether it's in job, or whether it's in marriage, whether it's in business, or whether it's in economy. So both micro environmental issues also have to be considered and macro environmental issues have to be considered. So therefore microeconomics and macroeconomics point of view have to be taken into consideration while planning for risk management. Thank you, students. I hope you would study this chapter in detail. You will find it very interesting, and best of luck to all the students.